The bread was hard as stone in his pocket, and Aaron Cale knew it was the only thing standing between him and a frozen grave. 3 days. 3 days since the supply caravan had been scattered by the blizzard on the high pass of Hadwin 7. 3 days since he had last seen another human face. The wind on this colony world did not whisper. It screamed. It carried ice that cut through coats and skin and bone, and it had already taken 2 of the caravan dogs and 1 of the older runners. Aaron was 26 years old. He was thin, tired, and not brave. He had only taken the supply runner job because the pay was steady and his mother was sick back in the lowlands. He had no weapons skill. He had no survival training beyond what every colonist learned as a child. He had a thin coat, a half-empty canteen, and 1 piece of dark bread wrapped in old cloth. He had been chewing snow for 2 days to fool his stomach. It did not work anymore. The wind pushed him sideways as he climbed. His boots cracked through the frozen crust. Somewhere ahead, he hoped, was the descent path that would take him down to Brightfall. Somewhere behind him, the rest of his caravan was either alive or buried. He did not know which. Then his foot slipped and he fell. He rolled down a slope of ice and loose stone for what felt like a long time. When he stopped, the wind was suddenly gone. He blinked snow out of his eyes and saw rough rock above him. He had fallen into the mouth of a cave. For a moment, Aaron just lay there and breathed. The cave was warmer, not warm, but warmer. He crawled deeper to escape the snow blowing in from the entrance. His hand found something soft. He pulled back. His fingers were wet with blood. Aaron froze. He fumbled for the small hand torch on his belt. The light was weak, but it was enough. A great shape lay on the cave floor. Long neck, folded wings, scales the color of wet stone. A dragon, a grown one, female by the size. Her body was cold. A black spear had been driven into the side of her throat, and the wound around the spear was crusted with frost. Aaron had seen the marks of poison tips before. Hunters. The colonial governor paid good money for dragon bones, and there were always men willing to climb into the high passes to earn it. She had been dead for days. Then he heard the sound. A small, thin cry, not one cry, 4. Aaron raised the torch with a shaking hand and saw them. 4 hatchlings, no bigger than house cats, curled against their dead mother's belly for the last warmth she had to give. Their eyes were barely open. Their tiny ribs pushed against thin skin. One of them lifted its head when the light touched it. It did not roar. It did not snap. It only made that small, thin sound. Hungry. Aaron sat down hard on the cold stone. He knew what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to back out of the cave. He was supposed to forget what he had seen. Dragons were marked as dangerous pests on every colonial map. Hatchlings grew. Hatchlings became creatures that could burn a farm. If anyone in Brightfall heard he had even seen them and not killed them, he would lose his job. Maybe worse. He looked at the 4 small faces. He looked at the spear in their mother's throat. He thought of his own mother in the lowlands, coughing in a small bed. His hand went to his pocket. He took out the cloth-wrapped bread. He stared at it. This bread was his life. Without it, the descent would kill him. He would lie down somewhere on the trail and not get up. He had been counting on it, planning around it, promising his own stomach that soon he could eat. He broke the bread into 4 equal pieces. His hands shook as he did it, not from cold, from a fear he could not name. The smallest hatchling, the one with scales like dawn light, tried to lift its head and could not. Aaron crawled closer. He pushed a piece of bread softly against its mouth. The little jaws moved, slow, then less slow. The bread was gone. He fed the next one, and the next. The 4th was the weakest, and he had to hold its head up with one hand while it ate. When the bread was gone, Aaron sat back against the cave wall and felt his stomach twist. He pulled off his coat. He laid it over the 4 hatchlings the best he could. They pressed into the cloth without understanding what it was. They only knew it was warm. "Live," Aaron whispered. His voice cracked. He was not sure who he was talking to, the hatchlings, the dead mother himself, just live, please. He took one last look at them in the weak torchlight. Then he crawled back out into the storm. The wind hit him like a wall. Without the coat, the cold went straight into his chest. He bent his head and started walking down the slope. He did not look back. He did not believe he would make it home. He only believed that he had done one thing in his life that was his, and no governor and no hunter would ever know about it. The snow swallowed his footprints behind him within minutes. In the cave, 4 small shapes pressed closer under a thin coat that still smelled of a stranger's hands, and they slept for the first time in days. No one in Brightfall believed Aaron Cale was still alive, until he walked through the south gate on the 11th day. He came in on bleeding feet. His lips were split. There was frost in his beard that had not yet melted. He had eaten tree bark, melted snow in his mouth, and on the worst night he had chewed the leather strap of his own belt because his stomach had begun to feel like a fist closing on itself. 2 children saw him first. They shouted for the gate guard. The guard looked at him, swore loudly, and called for a stretcher. Aaron did not need a stretcher. He walked himself to the dock office and stood in front of the foreman with his hands shaking. "I lost the load," he said. The foreman stared at him for a long second. Then he laughed, not a kind laugh. The kind men use when they are not sure if they want to hit something or sit down. "You lost the load," the foreman repeated. 8 crates of medicine, 6 of seed grain, and you walked back without even your coat. "The storm took most of it," Aaron said. "The dogs are dead. I do not know about the others." 2 of the others made it to Hill Station, the foreman said. He spat on the floor. "They said you ran ahead and got lost. They said you panicked." That was not true. Aaron said nothing. He had learned in the cave that some truths were not for sharing. If he said where he had been, if he said why his coat was gone, the questions would come, and the questions would lead to the hatchlings. So he let the foreman call him a coward. He let his pay be cut in half for the lost goods. He let the other runners stop sitting near him at meals. He took a smaller room near the loading docks. He sent half of his cut pay to his mother in the lowlands. He worked. He kept his head down. The years began to pass. 3 winters later, the old governor died, and a new one was sent up from the capital world. His name was Governor Halson, and he had ideas. He wanted Brightfall to grow. He wanted the colony to send more grain, more wood, more dragon bone to the inner systems. He raised quotas. He cut rations for workers who did not meet them. He sent armed teams into the high passes to burn out dragon nesting grounds so the slopes could be cleared for new farmland. Aaron heard the news in the mess hall. He kept eating his soup. His hand did not shake, but only because he made sure it did not. That night he could not sleep. The next morning he baked a small loaf of dark bread in his stove. He wrapped it in cloth. He walked to the edge of the forest at the north side of the colony, where the trees met the slope that led up into the mountains. He set the bread on a flat stone. He stood there for a moment. He did not say anything. Then he walked back. He told no one. He did it again the next winter, and the winter after that. Every year on the same day, he set out one small loaf of bread on a stone at the edge of the woods. The bread was always gone by morning. He told himself it was probably a fox, a hill goat, a hungry boy from the workers' camp. He did not let himself believe anything else. The years stacked up. Aaron turned 30, then 35. His mother passed in the lowlands and he did not have the money to travel for the burial. He kept a small garden behind his room. He grew turnips and a few stubborn beans. He fixed a neighbor's roof one summer and the neighbor gave him a goat in return. He named the goat Lump. Lump ate his beans. He laughed for the first time in a long while. Governor Halson grew rich. The dragon hunts grew bolder. Each year fewer dragons were seen near the colony at all. Some seasons, none. The old hunters said the creatures had moved deeper into the high country. The young hunters said the creatures were almost finished. Aaron listened to both kinds of talk and said nothing. One spring, A worker on the docks fell from a high crane and broke his back. Halcyon ruled it the worker's own fault and refused to pay his family. Aaron quietly gave the family half of what he had saved. He did not tell anyone. The worker's wife found out anyway and tried to thank him. He waved her off and changed the subject. That was the kind of man he was now. Small acts, quiet ones, the kind no one writes down. 12 winters after the cave, on a cold, clear night, Aaron stepped out of his room to bring Lump in from the yard. The sky was very black. The stars were very sharp. He stood for a moment with his hand on the goat's back and looked up out of habit. Then he heard it. A sound from the mountains, not wind, not rock falling. A low rumble, long and deep, the way thunder rolls before a storm, but slower, much slower. It went on for a count of 10. Then it stopped. Lump's ears went flat against her head. The goat pressed against Aaron's leg and would not move. Aaron stood very still in the cold yard with his hand on a frightened goat, and for the first time in 12 years, he allowed himself to wonder. Then he shook his head, called himself a foolish old man, and brought Lump inside for the night. He did not sleep well. The market in Brightfall was full of shouting people. The morning, the sky changed color. A boy was selling apples 3 for a copper. A woman was arguing with a butcher about the price of mutton. 2 children were chasing a small dog between the stalls. It was an ordinary day. The sun was high and pale. The smell of bread came out of the baker's open door. Then the sun turned green. It happened in a single breath. The light in the market went from yellow to a sick, oily green, and every shadow on the ground twisted in a way no natural shadow had ever twisted. The shouting stopped. Every face in the market lifted at the same time. High above the colony, hanging in the daytime sky, was a shape that did not belong. It was long. It was dark. It was the size of a small mountain laid sideways. Smaller shapes drifted around it like flies around a body. A ship, a fleet. The market screamed. The voice came a moment later. It came from everywhere at once, through every speaker, every comms unit, every old radio still bolted to a wall. It was not human. The words were human. The throat that made them was not. This world belongs now to the Voss Imperium. Surrender all stores. Surrender all leaders. Refusal will be answered with fire. People ran. People stood frozen. A man dropped a basket of eggs and did not notice. Aaron Cale was at the edge of the market with a sack of seed potatoes on his shoulder. He set the sack down slowly and looked up like everyone else. Governor Halcyon's reply came within the hour. His militia was small but loud. He had an old orbital defense gun on the hill behind the governor's house, a leftover from the colony's first founding. He fired it. It actually hit one of the smaller Voss ships. The ship broke apart in the green light and rained burning pieces across 2 outer farms. The Voss answered. A beam of light, thin as a needle and bright as a sun, came down from the largest ship. It cut through the air without sound. It struck the orbital gun and the hill it sat on. Both were gone. Not damaged. Gone. Where the hill had stood there was now a smoking pit, and the wind that rushed in to fill the empty space knocked old men off their feet in the market square. 3 more beams followed. 3 outer farms vanished the same way. The screams from those directions stopped very quickly. Governor Halcyon did not surrender. He locked his gates instead and turned his militia on his own people. He needed someone to blame. He sent his soldiers into the workers' districts to find hoarders. Anyone with more than a week of food in their home was a hoarder. Anyone who spoke against him was a hoarder. By that evening, 20 men and women had been dragged from their houses and chained in the public square for trial. Aaron was the 21st. A soldier had remembered the supply runner who lost a whole caravan years ago. The foreman from the docks, frightened for his own neck, had whispered the name. Aaron did not fight when they came. He let them put the chain on his wrists. He thought, in a quiet, almost calm way, that he had lived a longer life than he had ever expected after that night in the cave. If this was the end The end was the end. They lined up the prisoners in the square at dawn. A small crowd had been forced to watch. Governor Halson stood on a platform in a clean white coat that did not match the burning farms behind him. He gave a speech. The speech said that the colony's troubles were not caused by aliens in the sky. They were caused by traitors on the ground. He pointed at the chained workers. He said the lash would teach the rest of Brightfall to obey. The first prisoner was tied to a post. The man with the whip raised his arm. A shadow fell across the square. Aaron felt it before he looked up. The light dimmed. The air pressed down. Birds in the eaves of the buildings around the square went silent all at once. A second shadow joined the first, then a third, then a fourth. The man with the whip stopped with his arms still in the air. He looked up. He dropped the whip. The sky above Brightfall was full of wings. 4 shapes were descending. They were not Voss. They were not human. They were huge in a way the human eye refused to accept at first. Each was longer than the largest building in the colony. Each had 4 wings, not 2. Each had scales that caught the morning sun and threw it back in colors that did not have names. One shimmered in shades of dawn, one in dusk, one in deep storm, one in cold starlight. High above them, in orbit, the great Voss command ship began to turn. Its weapons rotated toward the new arrivals. A beam of white fire fell from above the clouds. It was not the green of the Voss. It was clean and pure and impossibly bright. It struck the Voss command ship across its middle and cut it cleanly in two. The two halves drifted apart in slow silence. Then they began to burn. The 4 shadows circled lower over Brightfall. Aaron stood in his chains with his face turned up to the sky. His old eyes were full of tears he had not given himself permission to cry in 12 years. The dragon at the front of the 4, the one with scales like sunrise, banked slowly through the air. Its great head turned. Its eye, larger than a man, found Aaron in the square below. And it knew him. Stones cracked under the weight of the first dragon as it touched down at the edge of the square. It did not land hard. It set itself down with the care of a parent stepping over a sleeping child. Even so, the ground sank under each foot. Dust rose in slow clouds. The 4 wings folded in along the long back like sheets of dawn light closing into a book. The other 3 came down behind it, dusk, storm, starlight. They placed themselves at the 4 corners of the square as if they had agreed on it long before they arrived. No one in the crowd moved. The chained prisoners did not move. The soldiers with their whips and rifles did not move. Even Governor Halson, on his clean white platform, stood with his mouth half open like a man who had forgotten how to close it. Then Halson remembered he was the governor. "Fire," he said. His voice was thin. He cleared his throat and said it louder. "Fire on them, all units fire." No one fired. The militia captain looked at the dawn-scaled dragon. Then he looked at his rifle. Then he set the rifle down on the stones at his feet. One by one, the other soldiers did the same. The sound of weapons being placed on the ground was the only sound in the square for a long moment. The dawn dragon's head lowered. It spoke. The voice did not come from its mouth alone. It came through the chest of every person in the square. It was deep, and it was old, and it was, somehow, gentle. "We are not here for you," it said to Halson. "We are here for him." The huge eye turned away from the governor and found Aaron again in the line of chained workers. "Aaron Cale," the dragon said. Aaron tried to answer. His mouth was too dry. He nodded instead. The dawn dragon stepped forward. The chain around Aaron's wrists snapped on its own as the dragon came near. He did not understand how. He only knew the iron simply parted. He stood with his arms free for the first time in 2 days, and he could not remember how to use them. "You do not know us," the dragon said, "but we have known you all our lives." The other 3 dragons stepped closer too. The dusk one had eyes the color of late evening over the mountains. The storm one had a long scar across its shoulder from some battle Aaron would never hear the story of. The starlight one was the smallest of the four, and Aaron remembered with a sudden ache in his chest that the smallest of the four hatchlings had been the weakest, the one he had to hold up to feed. The dawn dragon spoke again. It spoke now so the whole square could hear. 12 winters ago, in a cave in the high pass, our mother died protecting us from a hunter's spear. We were 4 days old. We could not lift our heads. We could not stand. We waited to die beside her body. Then a stranger came in out of the storm. The crowd in the square did not breathe. He had nothing, the dragon said. He had 1 piece of bread and 1 coat and 1 day of life left in his own body. He broke the bread into 4 pieces. He fed us with his hands. He covered us with his coat. And he walked back out into the storm to die so that we could live. The dragon's great head lowered until it was almost touching Aaron's shoulder. He did not know what we were. He did not know what we would become. He did not ask. He only saw that we were small and cold and hungry. Tears were running down Aaron's face now. He did not try to hide them. There was no point. The dawn dragon lifted its head and looked at Governor Halson. "This man you put in chains," it said, "fed 4 future kings when he had nothing. You burned the homes of our cousins for farmland. You sent hunters into the high passes for our bones. You stand in a clean coat above a square of starving people. You are not a king. You are a thief in a king's chair." Halson tried to speak. No sound came out. The storm dragon spoke for the first time. Its voice was rougher, deeper. "We rule the dragon clans of 17 worlds. We command fleets that the Voss did not even know existed. We came here today because we felt the Voss strike at this world, and this world is the place where our lives began. We would have come for any reason, but we came first for him." The dusk dragon spoke next, and its voice was softer. "The Voss fleet above is broken. The rest of their armada is on its way. They will arrive within the day. They believe they will find us unready." The starlight dragon, the smallest, the one Aaron had held in his shaking hand, finally spoke. "They will find us ready." The dawn dragon turned back to Aaron one last time. It lowered its enormous head until its huge, warm eye was level with the old man's. Its breath smelled, strangely, of wood smoke and bread. "You did not let us die," it said quietly. "So today we will not let your world die." Aaron reached up with one shaking hand. He placed his palm against the warm scales beside the great eye. 12 winters of silence, 12 winters of loaves left on a flat stone in the woods, 12 winters of telling himself it was probably a fox, all of it pressed up into his throat at once. "You lived," he whispered. "We lived," the dragon said. By the 2nd hour after midday, the Voss second fleet was crossing the orbit of the outer moon, and every screen in Brightfall was showing the same thing. A trader in the square had pulled an old viewing panel out of his stall and propped it up against a barrel. The crowd that had watched the dragons land was still there, larger now, fed by the rumor that ran through the colony faster than any soldier could chase. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders. Old women held each other's hands. The screen showed the dark of space, the green points of Voss warships, and 4 moving shapes climbing up to meet them. The dragons did not need ships. Aaron had not understood that until he watched it. The 4 kings had risen from the square together, slow and heavy at first, and then faster, 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 until the air around them shimmered like the air over a hot road in summer. They had punched through the upper sky in less time than it took the crowd to gasp. The screen had picked them up again past the cloud line, 4 bright spots climbing into the black, and they had not slowed. Behind them, from somewhere high in the mountains of Hadwin 7 that no human map had ever marked, more shapes rose. Dozens, then hundreds. The mountain that the colony called Cold Tooth split open along its peak, and a great dark cloud of wings came out of it. Dragons of every color and size, from young ones the size of horses to old ones nearly as large as the 4 kings themselves. They came not only from this world. The screen, switched to a wider view, showed wings coming from the rocky moon, and from the asteroid field, and from points further out that should not have been hiding anything at all. A boy in the crowd said very quietly, "There were so many of them, all this time." No one answered him. There was no answer. The Voss saw what was coming. Their fleet broke formation. Their captains, who had taken 17 worlds without losing a single ship, did the worst thing soldiers can do in a panic. They split up. The dragons did not split with them. The four kings struck the Voss flagship together. The Storm King came in from above and cracked the ship's spine with one blow of his tail. The Dusk King tore the main reactor free with her claws and threw it spinning into empty space, where it burst into a small white sun. The Starlight King, the smallest, slipped inside the broken hull and did something inside that none of the watching humans could see, but the ship's lights went dark in a wave from end to end, as if a hand had run along it putting out candles. The Dawn King did not even strike the flagship. He passed over it once, very slowly, and the metal of the hull simply melted away from the heat of his breath. It took less than a minute. After that, it was not a battle, it was a lesson. The dragon clans moved through the Voss fleet in pairs and in groups of 4. They wrapped around the larger ships and crushed them. They burned the smaller ones from inside out with breath that no Voss shielding had ever been built to stop. They caught escape pods in gentle claws and set them carefully on the rocky moon, alive, so there would be witnesses. The dragons, Aaron slowly understood, were not in this for slaughter. They were in this to teach. Within the hour, the Voss Emperor's personal channel was begging for terms. The Dawn King's voice, when he answered, came through every speaker on Hadwin 7 as well, so the colony could hear. "You will withdraw from this sector," he said. "Forever. You will pay back every world you have raided in this region with grain, with medicine, with the bones of every soldier you stole. You will recognize this world as a protected territory of the Dragon Throne. You will recognize humanity as a people under our wing." There was a long silence on the channel. "And if we refuse?" the Voss voice asked, smaller now. "Then we will visit your home world," the Dawn King said, "and we will not come with words." The Voss agreed within 10 minutes. The crowd in Brightfall Square did not cheer. They were too tired. They were too full. Some of them sat down on the cold stones and cried. Some of them laughed in a way that sounded almost like crying. A few of the older men just stared at the screen as if they did not yet trust their own eyes. While the four kings were in orbit, Governor Halsin tried to leave. He came down from his platform in his clean white coat with a small bag in his hand and a pistol on his hip. He had a private flyer on a pad behind the governor's house. He thought in the confusion that no one would notice. He almost reached the pad. The Dusk King sat down in front of him. She had not gone to orbit with the others. She had stayed behind. She lowered her great head and looked at the man in the white coat with eyes the color of evening, and Halsin made a sound that was not quite a word. She picked him up in one claw, almost gently, and carried him back to the square. She set him down in front of the people he had ruled. "This is your thief," she said. "We will not decide for you what to do with him. He is yours." The crowd looked at Halsin. Halsin looked at the crowd. Some of the workers stepped forward with the chains that had been on their own wrists that morning. Aaron stepped forward too. The crowd quieted for him without being asked. He looked at Halsin for a long moment. Then he shook his head very slowly. "No blood," he said. "Just send him away." The crowd, after a breath, did exactly that. Spring came slowly to Hadwin 7 that year, the way it does in the high country, but when it came everywhere at once. The four kings stayed for a week after the Voss left. They did the work that needed doing. They helped the colony pull buried families out of the burned outer farms. They flew supplies in from neighboring worlds that had heard the news and sent help. They sat in long, quiet meetings with the Council of Workers that the people of Brightfall had elected in 2 days to replace the governor's chair. The council wrote new laws. The laws were short and easy to read. The kings approved them only when they were sure the workers had written them, and not anyone else. On the last day, the Dawn King came alone to the small house at the end of the loading dock lane. Aaron was in the back garden when the great shadow fell over the fence. He was kneeling in the dirt, pulling a stubborn root out of the soil. Lump the goat saw the dragon first and pressed herself flat against the wall of the house, but she did not run. She had been working on her courage all week. Aaron stood up slowly. His knees were not what they used to be. He wiped his hands on his old work trousers and walked to the fence. The Dawn King lowered his huge head until his eye was level with the old man's, the way he had done in the square. "We must go soon," the dragon said. "There are other worlds, other troubles, cousins to find, old wounds to close." "I know," Aaron said. "We came to ask what you want," the dragon said. "Anything, a house in the high country, a seat among the council, wealth, title, the honor of the 17 worlds, speak." Aaron looked down at his hands. They were the same hands that had broken bread in a cold cave 12 winters ago. They had grown more lines since then. They still worked. "I have a garden," he said. "I have a goat, I have a small house. The neighbors are kind, the bread here is good. I am tired." The dragon waited. "I would like to be left alone," Aaron said softly. "Not forgotten, just left to be a quiet man, that is all." The Dawn King looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, the great head dipped in something that was almost a bow. "Then that is what you will have," the dragon said. "But you will not be unwatched. One of us always will rest in the mountains above this colony. We will trade off. You will not see us most days. You will know we are there." Aaron nodded. His throat was tight. "Goodbye, friend," he managed. "We do not say that word," the dragon said gently. "We are never gone." The kings rose from Hadwin 7 at dawn the next day. The whole colony came out to watch. 4 shapes, dawn and dusk and storm and starlight, climbed into the morning sky and were gone in a flash that lit the clouds from below. But high in the mountains, a single shadow remained, curled around the peak of Cold Tooth like a sleeping cat. The years that followed were good ones. The Voss did not return. With the dragon trade routes open, ships from 17 worlds began to land at Brightfall's small port. The colony grew. The new council was not perfect, but it was honest, and when it was not honest, the people removed it and chose another. The workers' districts got proper roofs. The orphans got a school. The school taught the story of the bread to every new class, not as a lesson in heroes, but as a lesson in what is owed to small and cold and hungry things in the dark. Every winter, on the anniversary of that night in the cave, the bakers of Brightfall made an extra loaf each. The children carried them up to the edge of the woods and laid them on a flat stone. The dragons did not need the bread. The dragons came down for it anyway. They took the loaves in careful claws and flew them up to the high passes and left them, in turn, at the mouths of caves where small and cold and hungry things were trying to make it through the winter. Aaron grew old in his small house. He gave Lump a long, soft life and buried her under the bean rows when her time came. He took a second goat and named her Lump too. He fixed roofs. He kept his garden. He never wrote a book. He never gave a speech. When children asked him about the dragons, he only smiled and told them to be kind to anything smaller than themselves, especially when no one was watching. He passed quietly in his sleep on a spring night when he was very old. The neighbor who came in the morning to check on him said his hands were folded on his chest and his face was peaceful. The 4 kings came that night. They circled the small house through the dark hours, slow and silent, their great wings stirring the new spring air so the apple trees in his garden shook loose their early blossoms over the roof. They did not roar. They did not speak. They only kept watch. At first light they flew together to the high pass. They went to the cave where it had all begun. The mother's bones were long gone, taken by the mountain itself, but the cave was still there and the stone floor was still cold. The Dawn King set down a single small loaf of dark bread on the stone. Then the 4 kings rose into the morning. and the wind carried the smell of the bread out of the cave and across the high country, where small and cold and hungry things lifted their heads and were, for one quiet moment, not alone. Humanity's strength was never its fleets or its guns. It was one ordinary man who shared his last meal with strangers in the dark and asked for nothing in return.